Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. Today is Tuesday, October the 27th. I am Joe Sarvati, affectionately known as Coach, and I am here with my PGA playing partner, Mr. Andrew Hansen. How are you today, Andrew?
I'm doing well. I kind of wish I was down in Bermuda to play on this beautiful course with some warmth. It's a little cold and rainy up here in the Northeast. So let's talk about some golf down in some warmth.
Yes, definitely. We are talking this week about the name's sort of cool, the Butterfield Bermuda Championship. You got to love that. That rolls really well. And it's at the Port Royal Golf Course in Southampton, Bermuda. And as I was doing my research, Andrew, I was digging in, and they have open memberships for this course. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if I just took off for Bermuda, joined this course, and just called it a day. Is that cool?
That would be cool. I wouldn't blame you.
I'll tell you what, looking at the holes in this course, it's just mind-boggling how beautiful it is. Almost every hole has ocean view. I think it does. And it's just pristine for a course that you can join and is public. It just, I can't believe the shape that it's in. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and sitting by the water there may be some wind this weekend.
Yeah, the weather's going to be really tough. The good thing about it for these guys, it's only 68-28 in yards, which, that's a putt-putt course for some of these dudes. It's a lot. Some of these courses we've seen at 7,600, etc. So 68-28 is shorter. It is a par 71, but as you alluded to, as normal on ocean courses, but specifically this week for this tournament, the weather's going to have everything to do with it. And you're talking on Thursday, which is the opening of the tournament tomorrow, sustained winds of 25 miles an hour. So that means gusts probably 30, 35. That's tough when you're trying to club selection, regardless of the distance of the holes. And even it's shorter, some you're going to have to club way up, club way down, sort of like a Pebble Beach in that sense. So it makes it much more difficult. And then on top of that, if you do get there to Saturday and Sunday, 90% chance of rain both days. So it's going to be spicy little tournament here to figure out, and tee times may be a big difference. So stick with us in Discord. If you want to join us at DFS Coach Talk, just go to dfscoachtalk.com. This way, if you're in our Discord, you can join for as little as 3 days for $10 or 5 days for $19. Then you'll get to follow us with the weather, because as we know in golf, if you have a morning tee time and the winds are 15 miles an hour, and you have an afternoon tee time and the winds are 35 miles an hour, it's plays a totally different course. So we'll follow that weather very closely.
Yeah, and because of the weather and the wind, the thing about this tournament is that it's the third time they've done it, and the previous 2 years there's been wind as well. Looking back at the reports, there was at least one day where the winds were over 20, and even when they weren't, they were usually 15 to 20. So the guys who have done well here the first 2 years were high on my board this week, Coach, because they know the course, and they have the experience in the wind, and so they'll be ready to go. So we took a nice deep dive on the performances in the last 2 years to get us ready to build some winners this week.
Yeah, and the thing that makes it a little more difficult too is this is only the third year, so you don't have a ton of history. And then, as we were talking before the pod, there's just a lot of guys that didn't make the trip to Bermuda. I don't know if the purse money is down or the weather conditions. They saw them in advance and thought, heck no, I don't want to, fight with that. But yeah, I was surprised because, in digging down these 2 years, you have so many guys that just did really well here, like Higgs and Clark and Sink and Todd. None of those guys made the trip. So it does open it up for some of the guys that we've indicated that have done well here for the last 2 years, and will certainly favor those guys. And then I know you pulled some great stats on the par threes and different things that are going to make a big difference, especially with guys that are not afraid to play in the wind. So we will definitely see how that goes, and then we'll look at the odds. I mean, Vegas generally knows their stuff as well, and it is a mixed bag. So this, going in, I'll say, this is not one of the best tournaments. So that doesn't mean that it's not a great DFS tournament, because sometimes when we get all those loaded tournaments that we're all excited about, it's like so difficult to pick from the top 20 because they're all phenomenal. But here you can pick and choose. Value is certainly not going to be an issue, and pretty much make whatever contrarian lineup that you like. So that's an advantage.
Yeah, so lots to get to. Let's start with the performance here in the last 2 years. The good news is we have 7 guys who have been in the top 20 both years who are playing this week.
Yeah.
Even though if you just look at the top 20 from last year, only 9 of the 20 are playing.
Unusual.
So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense that the guys who keep doing well keep going back. So let's look at those guys. I mean, Brian Gay, he won it, first win in a long time.
Yeah.
But he had finished tied for third the year before. So he just absolutely loves this course. Your man, Denny McCarthy, who you've played a lot over the years, was top 5 last year. He was tied for 15th the year before.
Yeah.
He's popping in some of the stats here. We'll get to him again. Ryan Armour and David Hearn. Okay, this is a pair I'm really excited about, Coach, because they both were tied for 8th in 2020, and they were both tied for 8th in 2019.
Oh, get out.
On this course. And if you look at driving accuracy, which is another stat we'll get to here, driving accuracy last year on the PGA Tour, Ryan Armour was 4th, David Hearn was 8th. So they're basically back to back in that. So those guys just stick together in this tournament for some reason.
That's unusual, but certainly something to be aware of. But it goes to show you how the depth in this tournament isn't exactly big time.
Yeah, I mean, these are definitely guys who are ranked lower in the world rankings, the FedEx Cup points. But again, back to the original point of 6,800 yards, it's a short hitters course.
Right.
So these guys, they're not the big names, big bombers, but they have found a course here that they like, so they keep coming back. The other guys finishing the top 20, Kramer Hickok has done it both years.
Yeah.
Affy Barnrot did it last year, and he's the only guy in the top 20 from last year who has done anything of note recently. He finished tied for 2nd in a European Tour event last month. So a lot of these guys, that's the one drawback, is they consistently have done well on this course, but they're not doing anything else on the other courses. So we don't get everything we want in terms of great recent form. But to finish out the list, we've got Anirban Lahiri, was top 20 last year. Russell Knox, okay, he's the one guy probably who's in decent recent form. He's made 2 of his last 3 cuts and finished top 20 both years. And then our man Hank Lebiota, top 20 both years, but 0 for 2 on his last 2 events, making the cut. He's just hit a bit of a slump, it seems like, dealing with some off the course stuff. So, I mean, that's the list, Coach. Again, not highly ranked players, but some guys who like this course.
It's definitely a thin list. There are some players playing it for the first time, though, we'll talk about a little bit too in the odds and such. But you know what I found the most amazing in prepping for this podcast, and I just can't figure it out for the life of me. I know he's way past his prime. He's not that good. He only won once. But let's talk about Brian Gay. Okay, the bottom line is he's the defending champ, and he finished tied for 3rd the year before. Do you know that Vegas has him way down the chart at 100 to 1? And it's amazing to me because it's not a good field. It just goes to show, what little faith. So, boy, this might be, we'll take a look at the odds here toward the end, because this may be one of those fluky tournaments where you can really hit an 80 or 100 to 1 shot.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like the right number to me, because there's barely over 100 golfers, and you got to figure he has a better than 1 in 100 shot here.
Beats me. That's from our partners at BetUS.com.pa, fresh odds right now. So maybe jump on that. And, his performance here has been spectacular. Maybe he's got some kind of Bermuda Triangle thing, voodoo thing going with this event.
Yeah.
But why don't you give us the first statistical analysis? Let's talk through that.
Yeah, let's look at the driving accuracy here, because with it being a short course, the rough isn't too penal, but you do have the water and you've got the wind. So, keeping it in the short grass has proven to be very important here. Brian Stewart, so I looked at the driving accuracy rankings from the last season, the full year, and just in the top 20, who's playing this week. We've got Brian Stewart, who was third in that stat. By the way, 73% of the fairways, which is kind of a reminder that we're out here as amateurs and we hit 50% of the fairways, and it feels like, oh, it's so impossible to hit the fairway. I mean, these guys, the best in the world, are not hitting it more than 3 out of 4.
No.
So,
although the setup might be a little bit tougher than the courses we play.
that's true. Very, very good point.
But you're right. You're right.
So Stewart, 0 for 3 in his last 3 cuts, so not good. Then you've got Armour and Hearn, who we've talked about. Then JJ Spawn, another short hitter, but he is cheap, 6,600 on DraftKings. He's made his last 2 cuts, so maybe something to consider there if you want a cheap player. Kramer Hickok, who we've talked about because he's been top 20 the last 2 years. He's 14th in driving last year. And then here's the first big name coach, Matt Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
17th in driving accuracy last year. We'll talk about him some more. And then the last 2, Mark Hubbard and Vaughn Taylor. So
yeah, not
you're looking
not
for
some stunning names, that's
no.
for sure.
I mean, Matt Fitzpatrick, really the key guy there in terms of high in the world rankings, coming off the win last time out, very expensive.
He's the
11,000.
Yeah, by the way. Yeah,
right.
But it's hard to get away from him just because he's just another level than most of these guys,
He is. Plus, all these guys we've been talking about are in the $7,000 to $8,000 range, even on DraftKings. So you can fill it out with Fitzpatrick and several of those guys if you want. The other stat here we'll hit is the par 3s between 225 and 250 yards, because it is a short course, but 2 of these par 3s are long at 235 yards.
And try to hit a green at 235 yards in 35-mile-an-hour winds.
Exactly. So, Coach, here's a trivia question for you. What do you think the PGA Tour scoring average is on these par 3s from 225 to 250?
3.67.
Okay. 3.22.
Oh,
so
okay. Better than I thought.
It is over par. I mean, our average would probably be 3.67 or higher.
Mine would be 4.77.
So there's only 5 guys on tour who averaged under par on those holes last year, and none of them are playing here. The best on those holes is Ben Martin. He tied for 6th last year, right at an average of even par. There's 3 guys who averaged even par on those holes last year who are playing this week. Ben Martin, who's only made 1 of 4 cuts lately. And then 2 names most people will know, Danny Willett and Nick Watney.
Yep.
Willett is coming off a win in Europe and T21 at the Shriners. He's 9,300. He's in the mix for me this week. And then Nick Watney, a nice high finish here at Sanderson Farms. He's 7,800. So there's a couple guys who I think will get a bit of an edge. I mean, may only be worth a stroke or 2 this week, but doesn't hurt. And then the rest of the guys in the top 30 in that category last year who are playing this week are more of the lesser known names. Cameron Percy, Denny McCarthy again, Michael Kim, Mark Hubbard again, Kramer Hickok again, and then Bo Hostler. So, I'm just going to zero in mostly on the names who keep, appearing on these lists.
Right. I mean, that's the best way to look at it. I mean, that and we can go over some odds here just to see what Vegas thinks. But, it's tough sledding. There's some good money to be made, but, there's not a ton of slam dunks. I'm with you, though, as far as what you mentioned with 2 guys in particular. Well, Fitzy, who we know is going to be chalk, and then Willett. I like the guys from Europe when it's going to be really windy. And they're so used to playing in rain pellets and 30-mile-an-hour winds. That's just their thing. Whereas our guys are a little bit more pampered on our side as far as the weather and the courses. So, I like those two guys as well. But let me give you a couple of odds here, Andrew. I'll give you the top 10. So, because there's going to be a few surprises in there, I think. And it reads like a tournament that's being played in Europe. That's what's hilarious here. So you've got Fitzpatrick at 12-1 as the chalk. Beasenhat, the man that you mentioned, 16-1, second choice. How about that? Patrick Reed is 20. Mito Pereira is 22. How about this guy, though? Hayden Buckley. Do you know much about Hayden Buckley?
I know that he's finished 4th and 8th in his last 2 events.
That's enough for him to be the 5th choice and get my attention. Then your famous buddy, your lefty pal, Seamus Power, Danny Willett, who we both like, Adam Hadwin, the Canadian. And then after that, it gets a little wild with some guys. But, again, like I say, you've got, and that's what doesn't make sense to me, is you've got guys like Schaub at 35-1, Patrick Rogers, 50-1, Migliozzi, 50-1. You have to go all the way down to some of the people we just mentioned. Watney, 60, Armour, 60. We've mentioned him a few times. The defending champion Gay at 100. So there's all kinds of all over the board guys. Hickok, 100-1. He came up in some of those. So I guess rather than just continue to dig in on the odds, the bottom line is this: the Europeans have an edge. Those guys that have been playing well overseas, they're coming in against some of the guys on the PGA Tour that haven't been making cuts. And so you got to consider them. The other key point I want to make, and again, we provide lineups for full lineups for FanDuel and Yahoo, and we provide a clipboard with highlighted core for DraftKings. I don't think price is going to matter much this week on any of them. So number one, don't let that affect you. And number two, don't be afraid to leave whatever on the board, 800, 1,000, who cares? Because it really doesn't come into play. If you're just trying to jam it with using all your salary and getting some of those guys, I just don't think it's the smartest move. So yes, in golf, a lot of times with all the big names, you got to squeeze in and barely make the salary. But this week, I think we're going to have a totally different, concentration. And I'm sure you'll see that in our lineups. Now, tonight, we'll provide those lineups like we just talked to our members. So we'd love to have you in Discord. If you want to join us, it's dfscoachtalk.com. If you want to check us out on Twitter, we're all at DFS Coach Talk. Andrew is at Language Olympic, and I am at Joe Sarvadi, JoeSarvadi. And if you're watching this YouTube, PGA podcast right now, hit the thumbs up, a little subscribe, give us a question, a comment, whatever. We really appreciate that. Also hit the alert button up in the corner, because we are providing all kinds of podcasts: basketball, football, baseball, golf, with everything going on with, obviously in the heart of the football season. Basketball's just now in its second week, very exciting. And then golf, tournaments are going to get better than this one. Not that there's not money to be made here. And then the World Series is going. So, we got everything happening. Great time to check us out. And again, just, shoot us a note. You can even sign up through Twitter. If you give us the information, we'll put you through to our website, and we'll go from there. So we'd love to have you for sure. And then with this PGA event, Andrew, let's talk about, what I know most of our listeners always join in for is Andrew's value plays, which have made us a ton of money through the years. And again, maybe value plays are a little not as important this week because we're not going to have to squeeze salary. But tell us some of the guys that you like now that you've heard some of those odds. Does that affect you, or are you still sticking with your guys?
Well, yeah. I mean, to follow up with your point earlier, I completely agree that price is less of a factor this week than normal, especially on DraftKings where, let me back up a step. The pricing on FanDuel is always softer than DraftKings.
Yes.
In golf, you can get an extra stud in there. And so on DraftKings, it's usually more of a
Yahoo, by the way.
Yeah. So on DraftKings, it's usually more of a battle. Like you got to consider, more of the cheap guys. But this week, not as much, and the most expensive guys aren't necessarily as attractive to me. So I agree. Definitely leave some money on the table. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't just go for the big names. In fact, Patrick Reed. Here's a guy who I'm leaning towards fading, Coach, which
Yeah.
is scary because he's maybe the biggest name in the field.
Yeah.
But he just hasn't been in recent form. Hasn't played this event. So why not go with some of the other guys around him? You mentioned that kind of top 10 in the odds, along
Yeah.
with Fitzpatrick. You've got these other guys, Buckley, the 2 top 10s, but Zadenhout, he also has 2 top 5s in his last 2 events. Why not play him over Reed
I
and
agree.
potentially get lower ownership?
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. By the way, Reed's 20-1. He is the third choice. So on name only, because he's not sharp right now. But does Patrick Reed have to be 100% to win this? Probably not.
right, he doesn't. That's why it's scary to fade him.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth considering. And then, just to circle back on pricing,
Yeah.
we didn't actually hit all of their prices, but a couple examples on DraftKings. I mean, Russell Knox is 7,700, David Hearn is 71.
Yeah.
So how about you lock those guys in? You can go with Fitzpatrick, and then not feel very pressed to fill it out from there.
I agree. And I'll tell you, I guarantee it next week when we do the pod, if we'll chat quickly about this one, I bet you the winning lineup leaves like 1,000, 1,500 on the board. I really do. It's that kind of tournament because if you get sucked into, oh man, I'm just going to go ahead and take Reed and take this guy because the money's there. I don't know if it's always going to pay off, but again, Reed's one of those guys that doesn't have to be at full capacity in this type of field, at least to get a top 10. But I prefer the Europeans. You'll have probably 2/3 of my lineup, Fitzy and Willett and all these guys. I just think the course sits better for them. They're in much better form. It's just that it's not on the PGA Tour. It's over in Europe. So, don't be afraid of any of those guys. And the statistical guys that you mentioned that kept coming up, they play shorter courses better. They can play and win. So I think, like I say, it's not the most sexy golf event of the year, that's for sure. But just because that's the case, I mean, there's a lot of bad slates in other sports at times, and you can just crush them because people are like, either they're not going to play it because it's not good enough, or they're just going to try to jam in those more expensive guys when they really don't fit. And let's go after it. I'm hoping to put a four crown lineup together. That's all I'm saying, because people will look at this, oh, this can be, and we do a 1 through 5 crown rating at Coach Talk, and they're going to see this field in this tournament and say, oh, this can be 3 or whatever, and there's 2.5, 3, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, if you get the right guys in and you're contrarian enough, even in cash and in this kind of tournament, leave some money on the board, get the right guys in. This can be a good four crown slate, don't you think?
I do. I'm excited. Let's go build these lineups.
I'm with you, man. All right. Any final words on the PGA stuff for this week?
That's it. Thanks for joining us.
Definitely. And follow us. I'm telling you right now, the key factor here is going to be the weather. I really believe that, with the winds and then the rain. And we're going to follow that, hour by hour. We've got the Weather Channel stuff up there. I'm always into that stuff because I like that advantage. And, 2-3 strokes in a PGA tournament based because you're playing in the morning or afternoon makes all the difference in the world. You happen to hit the good side of it on both days, and you're talking 6 strokes difference. That's everything. So we'll follow that closely, and we'll definitely pass that on to you. We certainly enjoy spending this time with you and appreciate our members that check this out, and also our listeners that hopefully will become members each week. So enjoy the golf. It's a beautiful scenic view, fun to watch. Even though the players aren't the big names, it's still phenomenal. And I still want to go down there and join at some point. That is my bucket list, Andrew. Go down there to Bermuda, get a place, and just join and play every day. That's what I want to do.
Amen.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to us. And we'll definitely be back again next week for our weekly PGA show. And remember, too, if you join us, we also put up lineups on Friday nights for the weekend only. And we'll know the cuts and all that wind results at that point, and then prep for the rainy weekend. So definitely join us. We'll catch you again next week for PGA Weekly when we look to crush it in DFS.